Subway has teamed up with Live Nation to bring you great food and great music for a great value. Right now, buy a Subway $5 footlong and get a Live Nation concert ticket for $5 to participating Live Nation shows like Nickelback, The Fray, and Crew Fest 2. Ticket price does not include fees. See store for details. Subway. Eat fresh. Eat fresh. The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
this is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
It might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. Our guest today, a guy who has not been in my life enough lately, but pretty soon he will be. August 16th, Season 3 of Mad Men, starting on AMC. And now he's on the BS Report on the Subway Fresh Tech Hotline, Mr. Jon Hamm. What's happening?
How you doing?
How are you doing? You kind of were like incognito for a while filming this show. Nobody hears from you.
I've been busy. I've been very busy. We're currently filming episode 9. And I've been going back and forth to New York. My girl's in New York, so I've been trying to see her as much as I can. And it's the doldrums of baseball season. So I'm pulling for the Cardinals to continue this astonishing run and pull away in the NL Central.
Yes.
And that's and waiting for football to start. So.
Well, let's talk about that first, because the Cardinals were one of the first fan bases that got hit by the taint of the steroid era, and my Red Sox have been getting nailed left and right with it lately.
I can't believe you just used the phrase "hit by the taint."
I know, they might have to bleep that out. How did you reconcile all of your emotions about the McGwire home run chase and the 70 homers and all the good stuff that happened when it turned out that maybe it wasn't as good? Well, I'm being kind.
I think it's interesting. I think because the Bonds happened so soon after McGwire happened, and kind of put McGwire's accomplishment, asterisk-laden accomplishment, kind of on the back burner a little bit.
Yeah. That
it really deflected all of that away and put it really on Bonds. McGwire's accomplishment was amazing, but now it's the second highest total, even though it's completely inflated and tainted. And it was also kind of, McGwire was an Oakland guy, and he was a guy. St. Louis loved him, and everybody loved him there, and he did a lot for baseball coming out of the strike and the year without a World Series and all that stuff. But I'm a '80s Cardinals guy. We played small ball in the '80s and the Whitey Herzog era with Ozzie Smith, and I think Jack Clark was our big slugger, and his big year was, I think he had 46 home runs. It's a different kind of baseball now, obviously. So I really wasn't that much of a McGwire guy, and I'm still kind of not. And I'm much more of a fundamental baseball kind of fan. Typical '80s National League baseball of stealing bases and all that stuff. Which is, I don't know. It didn't really bum me out that much.
You were a McGwire contrarian.
A little bit.
So, but everybody back in St. Louis, they were like totally on that bandwagon. That must have been a little devastating.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, there's not a lot to do in St. Louis, so yeah. It's a small town. So the baseball becomes, larger than life in many ways. No pun intended. But so I think a lot of people latched onto that guy, and his image was such a sort of, regular guy, and he was obviously this giant human being, but he projected this image of, which went over very well in St. Louis, of this sort of upstanding family guy, and when you see something like that happen, you kind of get bummed out. Obviously, as you well know, with Manny and now Big Papi, you're kind of bummed out. You're like, oh man.
Yeah, I think
does it take it away? No, but it certainly makes you kind of bummed out.
Yeah, it takes the memory that you had that was unfettered, and now it's. I was just talking about this with another guest we had this week. There's a little bit of a shadow, you see the old highlights, and in the back of your mind, you're thinking, yeah, he's juiced up. So
yeah, and you think, the guy, all right, but it's such a I just did this thing for the All-Star game where, you know, we were hanging out with, they had like the celebrity softball thing, which was,
Yeah.
I mean, you had to chisel the smile off my face. I was so excited to be there. But I was, you know, I'm playing third base next to Ozzie Smith, and Vince Coleman's in right field, and you're like, wait, what? Like, is this really happening? And I'm talking with Fred Lynn in the clubhouse. You know, you're thinking like, wait, you know, wow, like these guys did their performance enhancing stuff was, you know, coffee and booze.
Yeah, and quitting cigarettes for 2 weeks was an enhancer. I met Fred Lynn in like 2003 because I went with Jimmy when he played, and he actually had to get a restraining order out on me. So he was my childhood hero, and I was just following him around, and then he
and
finally
the nicest
was
guy on the planet too. I mean,
greatest,
incredibly nice guy. Loves the show. We sat and talked. We had a rain delay of about 2 hours, so we sat and talked.
Yeah,
which was again just fascinating, and you know, meeting these guys that I've looked up to my whole life and used to watch when I was a little kid, and most of them were the reason that I played baseball and the reason I still follow baseball. And you just think, these guys, you know, are the real deal, and they don't have asterisks next to their thing, and they don't have any of that stuff. And I can't imagine what it would be like to meet one of those guys now that is that asterisk guy and think like, oh well, you know. So what? You know, I
enjoyed your career. So yeah, I guess that would be awkward. You know? So we talked about this last time we were in the podcast because you know, you were out here forever, toiling away, struggling, doing anything to catch a break, and now you're playing third base next to Ozzie Smith. Was that one on the checklist of when you thought things that will happen to me if I someday make it? Celebrity softball with Ozzie Smith.
You know, God, man, when they asked me to do it, I don't know how fast I responded, but it had to set some sort of record between receiving an email and replying in the affirmative. Because I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I will drive myself there. Like, I was so happy to be a part of that, and it's like a dream come true. I'm sure you've had experiences like this now, you know, getting to the place in your career. I mean, your career is directly related to sports,
yeah.
But you know, our actor stuff is sort of tangentially at best related to that stuff. So you think, oh, maybe I'll get a chance to get some good seats to the World Series or the Super Bowl or something fun like that. But the idea of playing with these guys on the field, of, you know, it's phenomenal, and the fact that I didn't embarrass myself was even better.
So how'd you do? Because I didn't see the game this year, and only found out through emails that you were throwing around some leather.
It was I missed a line drive by I actually have a photograph of it on my phone where a friend of mine was in the seats, and he somehow got like an AP worthy photograph of this, but my vertical leap is not what it once was, so I missed a line drive, hot shot down the line by a fraction of a second.
Oh.
But I made up for it in the late innings by making an impressive, I must say, if not exactly technically perfect, backhanded stop of a hot ground ball down the third base line that was hit by one of the professional softball girls.
Ooh.
So she wailed into one of these things, and I like totally backhanded it and threw her out. And Ozzie Smith looked at me with this sort of shocked expression on his face of like, "Do you know what you just did?"
Third base is a strong statement for a celebrity softball game.
It was.
Everyone's trying to pull it, so you're always going to get some action.
I certainly wasn't going to take shortstop away from Ozzie Smith, so I figured the next best thing would be to play third base.
Did you? I mean, you're filming Mad Men, so how did you get? Did they give you like a day off?
It was on the weekend. It was on a Sunday, so I was able to fly in like Saturday day and fly out Sunday night.
And that would be funny if you came right from the set. You were still dressed as Don Draper, just changing in the locker room.
The locker room was a pretty hilarious experience as well, because again we were rain delayed, so it was a bunch of old jocks sitting around telling stories. And you're in a locker room. It's like, all right, you know, there's a lot of loose behavior in there, and you know, I'm sitting in there with Andy Richter's in there and a bunch of other people, and it's hilarious. And Whitey Herzog walks in. You know, again, we're sitting around just killing time, and Herzog walks in. He had come from a wedding, and the rain had made traffic unbearable, and he got there late, and so he shows up, and they're going to do a thing where he's going to come out and be the guest coach for Mike Greenberg, and so he comes in, and I'm sitting talking to Andy Richter, and I see Andy Richter's face just go like ashen, and I go, "What's wrong?" He goes, "I really didn't need to see Whitey Herzog's." It was that kind of an atmosphere, so it was eye-opening to say the least.
Well, when Jimmy did it in 2003, and I was there because we were filming a bit with him, that's the thing, you forget that's a whole baseball thing, just sitting in the locker room naked.
Yeah.
Not even thinking twice about it. So when these guys are in the celebrity game, it's like a chance for them to break out their testicles again. Here they are. And I remember specifically seeing more of Goose Gossage than I ever went to in my entire life.
Gossage was great, and they were all telling me, they're like, do not hit it deep off of Gossage. He will throw your head. He will go after you. It was very funny. It was funny.
It was a great era.
Die hard with these guys.
It was a great era. I was watching the MLB. They were showing the old All-Star games. And I was watching like the '76 All-Star game. You know, the guys that we grew up with.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what an era.
I do wonder, like, for the kids who are the age that we were then now, you know, when they think of the guys from this era, and, you know, it's just going to be different. And then beyond the steroid thing, like, I don't know if they're the personalities. You know, like, who is, like, Pete Rose now? You forget, like, Pete Rose was amazing back then.
Amazing. And you know, there was, I think part of it is there was less of a filter because there was less coverage.
Yeah.
You know, it was the baseball writers, it was newspapers, and it was the radio guys, really.
Well, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's too intimate now, because for what Pujols does, you'd think this guy would be just this icon. Well, you'd think he'd be with like Tiger and Federer, but nobody really thinks of him that way.
Part of it is that he's one of those guys that doesn't seek that out. He's not Jeter. He's not going to the clubs. He's not like hanging out. He's in a small market, so he like goes home to his kids and his wife and works on his game. And then in the off season, he like goes down to Dominican Republic and takes like 60 doctors and gives a bunch of kids eye exams. You're like, all right, you can't make fun of the guy. That's a pretty amazing thing to do, and he certainly doesn't have to do it. And you know, he could be Babe Ruth if you wanted to. You know, that guy could be running around and partying and doing whatever he wants. He's just not that guy. And I think a lot of those guys are really terrified to become those kind of personalities or characters, because they know the flip side of that is that they're going to just get hounded.
Yeah.
24/7 by whatever the baseball version of TMZ is or whatever. You know, there's not that filter that there used to be.
I was hoping that Pujols was going to make a run at 62, which I don't think is going to happen. He's at 34 now. Basically, it's about 8-9 weeks left, but a little less than 2 months. And I just thought that would have been interesting if he had started to close in on the 62. How the Cardinals,
it would be great.
How the Cardinals fans would have reacted to it.
It could still happen. Like if they get probably not this year, but that guy's got a lot of good years left in him.
Yeah.
And I think if they get a few more hitters that decide to start hitting. I mean, what Holiday's doing right now is insane. The guy's hitting like 650 since he came to the Cardinals.
Mortal lock, too. Going from AL, Oakland Coliseum, going to having Pujols right in front of him in the National League.
How about that?
Yes. That's an upgrade. I liked what the Cardinals did, and I knew Lugo was going to play well for you guys. It really bummed me out.
What is he, 73? I mean, the guy's amazing.
It was just one of those things where it was like a throw-in. It was like, this guy's going to factor into the playoffs now. There's no doubt.
He's like one of those guys like they have in the NHL.
Yeah.
He was like Stefan Matteau or one of these guys, or Tikkanen, or those guys that they would always they always get thrown in some weird trade toward the end, and then they would go crazy in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh yeah, that's why we got this guy, because he's been there a million times and he's a great clubhouse guy and he knows, he's been in every situation. He's got ice water in his veins and he's like, oh yeah, this is what I do.
Plus, nobody grabs their crotch with more gusto. It takes like 2 months to get used to it when you're following.
It is a lost art.
It really is. It brings it back to the 70s. Hey, you brought up hockey. You brought up hockey. The playoffs were pretty, NHL kind of making some noise a little bit. I felt like.
I like it. I like what they've done. They've kind of been laying low. I don't think it was their stated objective to do that, but there was really nowhere to go but up from where they had been. And this, I watched. I had no rooting interest in it other than being a fan of hockey, and I watched the Stanley Cup playoffs. I was like, you got to be kidding me. These teams are playing great. That Game 7 was phenomenal. They had a couple great Game 7s in the whole playoffs. It was amazing. The Blues flamed out early, but they made it a pretty incredible charge to even make the playoffs. And then they just ran into a hot goalie. What are you going to do? But I loved it. I grew up watching the sport. It was what you did in St. Louis when you didn't have a lot of money and you couldn't go to a baseball game. It was like, let's go to a Blues game. We can always get tickets. And it was always entertaining. It's unfortunate they haven't really figured out a way to properly televise it. I don't think they have the right announcers and the right, Canada does it really well. If you ever get up into Canada and watch Hockey Night in Canada, it's pretty amazing to watch.
Yeah.
But it somehow never really translated down here. But they've done some cool things. The thing they do, the Winter Classic thing, is amazing. And it's really great for the game and brings it to a lot of people that I don't think would see it. And it's like the perfect thing to watch on New Year's Day when you're completely hungover.
I agree.
And you realize, well, at least I'm not standing outside in Toronto or Boston or Detroit or somewhere where it's 150 below zero and, watching a game in a baseball stadium.
Yeah. The HD is a big help.
Big help.
That and soccer, I said it before, but soccer and hockey, the two HD sports, and strangely, the reality show Survivor. Those three things have been invigorated by HD.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Porn, not as much.
Not so much. No.
Yeah. You actually like the less pixels with porn.
Yeah. You really don't want. You don't want to see a lot of skin issues.
Things. Yeah, you don't want to see things. Things are bad in HD. But seeing a hockey puck is a nice thing.
Yeah, that's a plus.
Hey, there it is. I actually saw that slap shot and where it went.
Yeah,
so yeah,
I could see where it's going.
I loved it. I mean, the Bruins got knocked out. Yeah, you would have been very proud. I got very nice bandwagon league. I have a permanent seat on the bandwagon since I was there through age 25.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Well,
hockey is a perfect bandwagon sport. It's not unlike basketball in that way.
Yeah.
I know you're a big basketball guy and I'm not, but I do bandwagon myself whenever I pick a team and I root against them. I usually root against the Lakers because I was a Lakers guy in the 80s, but not so much anymore. So.
Well, I turned on hockey because of our owner. And I was just, I'm never going to follow this team again until this owner sells the team. But now with the salary cap, it's like he can't even do that much damage. So I'm getting sucked back in, and I'm actually going to get the season pass this year.
Nice.
I'm in. I'm going to be in from October on. Yeah, it is.
It's worth it.
It's enjoyable. Yeah. Hey, I wanted to ask you about athletes and Mad Men. And, do you ever have somebody come up to you and say, I love your show, man, and it's like some athlete, and they're like, really? You watch the show? Stephon Marbury, you're a Mad Men fan? Like anybody of that caliber?
The last person that I spoke to that enjoyed the show was Freddie Lynn. He was a huge fan, and it was kind of a weird out of body experience. I mean, he's an older guy now, but yeah, it was a weird kind of moment for me. I was just like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah.
I just kind of turned into my 12-year-old self and was like, wait, what?
What would you have said if he said, I didn't like what you did to that lady when you grabbed her in an inappropriate place at the restaurant?
I have a feeling that a lot of baseball players actually really like that scene.
Season 3. So we moved ahead 2 years again, correct?
I'm not going to confirm or deny that, but
he's already been on the record. He said it's every 2 years the show.
I think he was misquoted in that. I think he was kind of never saying, he was never taking anything out of the running. He was saying it might jump forward, it might not. What we did last year, we moved ahead like 14, 16 months, something like that. And it was kind of great for the storytelling of it because it enabled us to do a lot with flashbacks and there was a mystery of sort of what happened with Peggy. She had this baby? What's she going to do with it? And then ending last season as we did with the revelation that my wife on the show is pregnant enables us to maybe, how far ahead do we move? I'm not going to say. It will be made clear on August 16th definitely where we are. But it's
so you keep it in a mystery
or denying it. Yeah.
All right. But Don Draper kind of lost his marbles a little bit in season 2.
Well, he got to. I think a lot of his chickens came home to roost, so to speak. And he was and still is dealing with the consequences of all of what he's done in his life. And I think that's a big kind of theme on our show, is that these people are presented as kind of icons and these masters of the universe, and they still have to, when they mess up, they still have to deal with the repercussions. And he had a lot of balls in the air, and they all kind of came crashing down as the season progressed. And I think a lot more happens in season 3, and there's a lot of change coming his way, not only in his life, but obviously we know what happens as time goes on in that era in our culture, and a lot happens in the culture as well. So he's kind of managing that as well. And it's so far it's been an amazing season. I can't wait for people to see it.
How worried were you when the whole contract negotiation thing was going on between the creator and the network?
I was worried, but I always, in the back of my mind, said I can't imagine. I think we actually talked about this a little bit when it was happening at Jimmy's or something, but I could never imagine them not doing the right thing. I think it's always weird whether it's a contract negotiation with your favorite athlete or with a movie star or whatever it is. You're kind of like, oh, come on, like, just do the right thing, come up with a number.
Yeah.
Make everybody happy, but come up with a number. And it never, I don't think it ever really got to the place of, there was a lot of grandstanding on both sides, but I think at the end of the day, both parties wanted to be where they were. So then it was just really about coming up with a number. And I think they came up, it was a perfect negotiation and a perfect compromise where both parties left the table unhappy in some way, but they still are there.
That's actually one of my favorite little unknown things, is like the perfect negotiation. Everybody's about 76% unhappy when they walk away.
Yeah.
You're like, man, I guess I had to do it, but I wish. But that's usually how life works.
That's kind of it, You're like, you don't want to be the guy that rakes somebody over the coals and then leaves the other side feeling like they got totally screwed. And so again, like I said, I think the foundation of it all was that both parties wanted to be making this show. And
you know what else works like that? Fantasy trades. If one side is totally pleased as punch with what they got in a fantasy trade, odds are they molested the other guy in the trade.
And everybody else in the league is like, come on, what are you doing? Like, the collusion is not just for NFL owners in real life.
Well, you're making a big step this year. You're joining our fantasy league, the one with me and Sal that we always refer to on this podcast.
I am excited and terrified at the same time.
And your presence will be bumping out. We've gone to Survivor rules this year at the draft. Last year's defending champs, your friend Tall John and my old intern Jamie, they co-own the team. They get to actually vote somebody out on the podcast and be one of the other 10 owners.
That is the greatest rule change to hit fantasy football in the history of fantasy football.
So last week last week we did the draft order, and of course I got the number 1 pick. So now you're rooting for me to get voted out because you get Adrian Peterson, and now would have been bummed out if I got voted out, but now to get voted out, having the number 1 pick would be you'd have to carry me out of the room.
And now somebody has immunity too, because I believe I was present for that hilarious contest.
Yeah, Sal has immunity, but, they could always change the rules. Survivor will do that, where they'll change somebody will have an immunity, but now they don't. And so, we don't know what's going to happen, but everyone has to prepare for the draft. You show up, and you might get voted off. You might not.
And I think that is the wrinkle that makes this rule even better. It makes it an A+ instead of a solid A, is that you don't know until draft day. You have all your materials. You're ready to go. And it gets pulled out from under you. It's phenomenal.
Sal and I saw Sal last night, and we did a 4-round mock draft of what we thought everybody was going to do, which on the signs of you need a life scale is like about a 9.7 out of 10.
I think it ranks a little higher for him because you actually get paid to do this.
True. Yeah, it's true. I didn't even think of that. Well, it turns out that, so obviously I'm going to take Peterson first, but the top four that I would end up having would be Peterson, Greg Jennings, Reggie Wayne, and Tony Romo. I like my fake team.
It's a pretty good. That's a pretty
nice
good top
fake
four.
team. Yeah,
that's a pretty good top four.
But that also could end up being your top four if I'm sent home.
It could very well be. Although releasing this information out into the public may actually shift the draft order. You never know.
Well, see, here's my thing for the co-champs. It's more fun if I'm in the league because I'm going to talk about it on the podcast. I'm going to argue with different people about it. I would vote out one of the people who doesn't have a podcast.
I think everybody has a podcast at this point in the history
right.
of America. Isn't that the case?
It's like the end of Pump Up the Volume. When I don't know if you ever saw that, Christopher Slater. Everybody's doing their own radio show.
Exactly.
I think that's what life is like. So, you mentioned earlier that you're still filming episode 9 of season 13, yet episode 1 is coming out on season 3. Episode 1's coming out in 2 weeks. So you guys are still filming, even though I'm seeing the episodes?
Oh yeah, definitely. That's how it works with most shows. There's an overlap.
Really? Hey, why didn't I know that?
I think a lot of people don't realize that. It takes a long time to make a TV show. It's not like a movie. You got to kind of make them in order, and the lag time of making a show versus airing a show. It takes an hour to air a show, or a week. And it takes we shoot our show in 7.5 business days. So it takes a long time to go through production and pre-production and then post-production and everything else they got to do to kind of polish these things up. And so it's just naturally, we're a summer show and we don't have hiatus weeks and everything, so we just kind of plow through and get them all done. But
how do you handle do you watch it? Like, are you going to watch episode 1?
Oh yeah, I do. I'm a fan. I mean, I like the show. I was just on a plane this morning and I watched an episode that I hadn't seen in a while and I'd forgotten a lot of it and I just was kind of, I like it. I like watching it.
That's great. The guy sitting next to you is probably texting his buddies like, Jon Hamm, he loves himself. He was watching Mad Men on the plane. You're studying it.
I was just, checking in with myself, making sure I don't suck.
Well, I mean, that's a good thing, though. You're learning. You're like, I probably shouldn't do that. Maybe I just noticed a little tick that I have that I didn't notice I have.
Pujols watches, films himself hitting. Come on.
I listen to every podcast I do like 10, 12 times, trying to, what could I have done better?
You want to hone your craft. What can I say?
Yeah. So you got an Emmy nomination again. Or not again. But did you get it last year or no?
I did. This is my second nomination for the show.
But you didn't win because they gave it to like Corey Haim or somebody.
No, they gave it to Bryan Cranston, who
he's pretty good.
Is the star of Breaking Bad, which is another show on our network, and he's phenomenal in it. And if you haven't seen that show, you got to watch that show. It's great, and he's great in it. Completely different than our show, but still very, very cool show. And he's very deserving. He's nominated again this year. That's a helicopter flying over me right now.
That sounded cool.
But yeah, I was nominated again this year. It's an amazing honor to be included with guys like that.
But you also got nominated for something else.
I did for a guest spot I did on 30 Rock, which is probably my favorite show on television.
See, if you win 2 Emmys, I think this would be the Eat True Hollywood moment for you, where they're cutting a commercial with you holding the 2 Emmys and like, what John didn't know was that his life would spiral out of control. Then you're immediately like doing heroin nonstop, and that's it.
If I win the 2 Emmys, which I'm not going to, but if I do, that'll just be another thing I have in common with Kathy Griffin.
Don't pose for a picture where you're gleefully holding the 2 Emmys. Don't give Eat Your Hollywood Story like any possible ammo for that cut to commercial.
It's what Matt always says. He's like, you never want to be the guy in Vegas who stands up and says, I cannot lose.
Yeah. What's this movie Stolen Lives that you're doing? Or you did? That's coming out.
I did it. I shot it last year. It's a small independent film, and it's I don't know if it's going to ever come out, but it's an independent film, so it doesn't have distribution, and they're going to festivals and this, that, and the other. But it's a little murder mystery that I made between season 1 and 2. That is an interesting story about kind of these parallel stories. One takes place in the 1950s and one takes place in the current time. And I play the guy in the current time who's a cop and who's who has a sort of personal tragedy. His son, his only child, is kidnapped, and they don't know what happens to it. I think obviously it's a murder, but he never finds the guy that did it. He has a strong suspicion that this one guy did it, and so they dig up their construction site or something, and they find the decomposed remnants of a kid kind of buried in this box, and it turns out it's not his kid, but it's a kid that was taken many, many years ago, and he thinks that there might be a clue. So it kind of bounces back between the story of this child that was abducted in the 50s and murdered, and then he's trying to put it all together, and it's a good story. It's a first-time filmmaker and a first-time writer and a lot of first-time guys, but Josh Lucas is in it, and Rona Mitra and myself, and it's a cool story. I hope it gets seen. I haven't seen it, so I don't know. I mean, I hope it's good, but I have not seen it.
Is that weird that you filmed something that might not even get released?
It happens a lot more nowadays than people think, just because it's become a lot easier to make movies and to get movies made, but it's become a lot harder to get them distributed. It's when Transformers is on 4,000 screens around the country, that means that there's a lot less screens available for other movies than movies that are smaller, and so there's definitely sort of 2 or 3 tiers of distributed entertainment. And my girlfriend Jen has made several independent movies, and finding distribution for them, if you don't have a big movie star, or if it's not a big kids movie, or it doesn't have a big hook, or it doesn't have a big iTunes soundtrack or whatever it is, it's difficult, and so it's not really that uncommon.
Your girlfriend is part of the, I don't want to say the problem, but she was one of the movies that gave everybody hope that it could also happen to them. Like she did Kissy Jessica Stein, which was a big success. She made Kissy Jessica Stein in like 1997, and that was kind of that was a big hot time for independent movies, and a lot of things came out then, but that again was before the era of Netflix and direct download and iTunes and all this other stuff, where there were so many other ways to. Now there are so many other ways to kind of get movies out, and people don't go to movies the way they used to, and it's a lot. It's just a lot harder. It's a completely different landscape. I am a fan of like the Time Warner. We have Time Warner. We also have DirecTV. Don't ask. But I like when they have those early premiere. It's like $9.99 or something.
Yeah,
a movie that's out in the theater. We can watch it. We don't have to get a babysitter. I love it.
And that's I don't want to say it's part of the problem, but that's part of the challenge of releasing a film. It's like that's a perfectly legitimate way to watch a movie, but it's not a theatrical release. It's just a different way to do it, and people I think are still trying to figure out what the optimal way to do that kind of stuff to get your money back. Basically, if you raise $3 million to make a movie, you want to get that money back somehow. And it used to be if you got it in the theaters, eventually you'd make it back because you'd sell the TV rights and you'd sell the video rights and you'd sell all the other stuff. But now it's kind of like no one really knows what to pay for that stuff anymore.
Well, I do wonder is the next decade 2010 to 2019? I am a fan of starting the decade with the 0, not with the 1. But I do wonder if this is the decade of everybody just stays home.
Could be.
I can watch. You don't need Lakers season tickets anymore because you have a nice TV on HD and you can watch it at home. I don't need to go to the movies.
You get all the games.
Yeah, I just never have to leave my house ever.
But there is something to be said. I mean, I'm a big fan of seeing things live, and I know you are too. Like,
yes,
the idea of going. There are very few sports that are better on TV than actually in the arena, and I think NFL football is one. But I think, hockey, there's nothing like watching hockey live. There's nothing like watching basketball, especially a playoff basketball game, live. Like being in that arena, especially if it's your team and you're watching it. Baseball's the same way. Like, I love going to, I'm not a Dodger fan, but I love going to Dodger Stadium because I love watching baseball live. It's fun to me.
You're a Dodger Stadium's fan, I hope.
I love Dodger Stadium.
I think it's so underrated.
It is so underrated. It's one of the great places to watch baseball.
And what's funny is you could film a Mad Men scene there right now, and you wouldn't have to say, "Hey, could you guys change so and so?" Like all you'd have to do basically is CGI out the scoreboard.
Yeah, really is true. And I remember being a little kid because it seems like the Cardinals and the Dodgers would play each other in the playoffs all the time.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at that stadium as a little kid and being like, man, I had the same experience with watching the Rose Bowl. And it would always be sunny, and everybody would be like tan and good looking and having a good time, and there's a beach ball thrown around, and you're like, man, that seems like the place to be. Like, it's not, it's never cold, it never rains. It was always, it was night when we're watching the game, but it's always dusk there, and it looks beautiful, and the fans are into it. And yeah, I mean, I was ever since I was a little kid, I was fascinated by California. Why is it always so bright in California?
You're preaching to the choir. The other two things, not just the sports, but Battle of the Network Stars always used to get me. Like, we're live on the Pepperdine campus. Like, wow, that looks beautiful. You go to college there?
Yeah, no kidding. Why would you go to class? Why would you just not be here all the time?
And then, like, the Three's Company intro. Like, they're riding on the beach, and the bike falls over. Everybody's laughing. There's hot girls everywhere. And it's like, wow, that looks
food
fun.
up in the air to the birds. Come on.
Yeah. And meanwhile, like, I'm in Boston, and we're making movies like The Verdict. It's a grisly crime drama, and it's winter
exactly.
out. And
everybody's miserable, and it's freezing.
Yeah. And I agree. I know for me, I always kind of felt like I was going to end up in California just because I was so corrupted by the TV and the sports and the movies.
It is not a bad place to spend some time. I'll put it that way.
Hey, speaking of Boston, you're doing this Ben Affleck movie.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that.
It's a big movie.
Literally right after Mad Men, I'm going to Boston. I have never really spent time in Boston, but I finally got a chance to sit down and talk to Ben, and I think he's an amazing director. His first film, Gone Baby Gone, I thought was really phenomenal. I thought he did a great job with it.
Yeah.
And it is kind of a big movie. Like it's a big kind of crime heist thing, and
it's based on Prince of Thieves, which was a really good book, but it was actually set in the town that I lived for 10 years in Charlestown.
Yeah, in Charlestown. This whole thing takes place in Charlestown, so it's going to be. I think it's going to be amazing. I'm really looking forward to it. And I play a cop, and Ben plays the bad guy, and who's not that bad, but he's a bad guy, but he's just kind of got a heart of gold, and yeah, it's going to be fun. I think it's really going to be a good movie. I
think you guys are either going to be really good friends or natural enemies. I'm not sure how it plays out. I think you'll end up being friends because of the sports thing. I think they'll just bond you.
I think that St. Louisans will always have a warm place in any Bostonian's heart just because we gave you the World Series in 2004.
That's a good point.
So
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, I think that for whatever reason I can always go back to that and be like, you know what, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Well,
we didn't show up for that one, so you're welcome.
I was getting emails from the St. Louis fans last week from people there claiming that they are now the 2004 World Series champs, which I can't even fight back. What am I going to say?
Yeah. Well,
whatever. I'd like to assume that guys on your team were cheating too. That's how I take solace in it.
If you look at the people we had, it's probably not that far off.
You're not that big.
Jimmy Edmonds, I don't know how that guy's still walking without any help. Larry Walker, he was 150.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hey, last thing. So I'm doing the SG Awards for different things of the decade. The first two categories we have up are the best movie drama and the best TV drama. And you'll be delighted to know that Mad Men was nominated for best TV drama of the decade by myself.
I love that. I agree.
Since it's my awards. Unfortunately, Mad Men not doing that well.
Really? The Wire?
Well, let's see. I want to see what...
Sopranos.
We have... Right now it's The Wire, Sopranos, Lost, 24, West Wing, and Mad Men. You're trailing. You're last.
Well, we don't have those big network followings like a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling the crossover Mad Men audience and ESPN audience is not quite as big as maybe for Lost or 24, given that 24 gets advertised on the Super Bowl and the World Series.
Yeah, that's a problem.
I've gotten used to saying this quite a lot. It's an honor just to be nominated.
That's nice. I like that. If you had to vote for anyone else, who would you vote for?
Sopranos. I love that show. It's a close one between The Wire and Sopranos, but I think those two shows are pretty phenomenal.
Well, we're going to have that argument at some point because I think it's clearly The Wire over Sopranos. Because I think The Sopranos is like one of those athletes that I don't want to say Reggie Miller, although I'm going to use that as an example because The Sopranos was much better at TV than Reggie Miller was at basketball. But one of those shows where everybody has chosen to remember all of the good things about it and has forgotten a lot of the bad things. That's all I'm going to say.
I think that's fair. I think that I would counter with a similar argument with The Wire, because I've recently watched, in the last year, basically, the whole Wire front to back, and I watched it in the space of about 6 weeks.
Yep.
And there's every show's good, but there are some clunkers, and the writing is not. In my opinion, the writing is not nearly as elegant or awesome as it is on Sopranos.
Huh.
So I'll counter with that.
Season 2 of The Wire that's what people
probably the best season.
Oh, you liked season 2 the most? See, that was my least favorite season.
But I liked it because coming out of season 1, to go into that whole thing, where you're like, whoa, it's a whole different thing, and you didn't know that that's what they were going to do. Like season 3 would be a totally different thing, season 4 would be a totally different thing too. Like I thought, oh, okay, well these guys are doing something kind of amazing.
See, I feel like with The Wire was really saying something about American society, and I'm not sure what The Sopranos ultimately was saying other than kind of glorifying the mob a little bit.
Well, I understand that, but I guess my counter would be that I don't know if it's a television show's job to necessarily say something about
nice
society.
counter, I like it.
I think it's also supposed to entertain, and I thought Sopranos did that pretty great.
Fair enough.
How about that?
I like it. Well, how many shows does your show have left?
Seasons or shows?
Seasons. I mean, had they put a cap on it, or have they said
they
let's
have not
do this
put a cap on it?
good?
We're all under contract for another, or Matt's under contract for this season and another one. He signed a 2-year deal. So I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Because you know what would suck is if, all this season 8, it's 1976, and Don Draper has the Mike Brady perm, Afro perm, whatever.
You never have the Brady? Afro perm, but come on, couldn't you see the guy like sporting some mutton chops and like?
I don't know if I want to go there.
Running a studio, come on.
That would be interesting.
Come on, why not?
That'd be interesting. I see. By that point, though, you have been smoking so many terrible whatever fake cigarettes that you have forced to. What are they called?
I will have turned into Robert Evans.
Well, what are those cigarettes called? Yeah, what are they, like clove flower cigarettes? Or something?
They're kind of like they're herbal cigarettes. So, fill in your own joke there, but what they don't have is nicotine. Yeah. You're still essentially lighting something on fire and inhaling it, which is not good no matter what it is. You light vitamin C on fire and inhale it, and it wouldn't be good for you. But I'm not recommending that, by the way. That's not an endorsement. But it's, it is what it is. We shoot indoors a lot, and so we fortunately have a pretty rock-solid ventilation system. So
okay, good. All right. I'm always worried about your lungs. All right, well, I hope you don't take my number 1 pick in a couple weeks.
I hope I don't either.
I really don't. That way too. And good luck with the Emmys. Try not to pose for that 2 Emmy picture. I think that would be bad.
No. Trust me, I don't think that will be a problem.
And I will also help you navigate the streets of Charlestown when the time comes. Yeah.
I think I'll be seeing you in a few weeks anyway at the draft. So
yes, you will. All right. Good luck with the premiere.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at PodCenter at ESPNRadio.com.
Peace out.
This concludes another installment of the BS Report. And with all the talk about sports, Bill Simmons neglected to mention this important just breaking news, which frankly cannot go unstated. This summer, Subway is teaming up with Live Nation to bring you great food and great music for a great value. Right now, buy a Subway $5 footlong and get a Live Nation concert ticket for just $5 to some of the hottest Live Nation shows like Nickelback, The Fray, and Crew Fest 2. Ticket price does not include fees. See the nearest Subway for details.